Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Artist Strong's Creator Profile. It's been a little while, and I'm really excited today to bring to you Kina Forney. She's an artist that I know from Ottawa. She works in all kinds of media, but her work really speaks to recently kind of images and inspiration from space. And I think it's beautiful and colorful, and she's really kind of stepped up her game in this past year in terms of her approach or her goal setting. And all of that's made me really curious about kind of her big why, as well as she's run a successful Kickstarter that funded itself several times over. She met her goal and then some. And it was specifically to make a bullet journal with her artwork on the cover. And part of her mission or motivation for this was she wanted to support and work with local businesses. And I think wherever we are in the world, we can all learn from that and take Kina's wisdom and figure out if this is something we might be interested in too. So thank you, Kina, for being here with us.
I'm so happy to be here. This is really cool.
Can you tell us a little bit about your art interest and how you came to realize that creativity was important to you?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I've always been like super into arts and crafts as a kid. So it was kind of, it's always been there, right? So it's always the kid in class who was drawing or getting, people asking me to draw for them or something. And I would always count down the days until it was art class or, arts and crafts and stuff like that. So it's always been there. And I think I always knew I wanted to do something with the arts. And there were a few different paths that, I kind of had in mind, but creativity has always been something that I've really wanted to pursue. So like I've always loved cartoons, and that's played a huge role. Probably in how I use color and stuff, but creativity has always been like really close to my heart. So.
It's great. It's important to me to start the conversation this way because in our community, we celebrate both people who embrace their art full stop just because they like doing it. And that is worthy and valuable and enough. And then we also have artists who want or feel called to do something with the work, perhaps sell it or exhibit or consider self-funding through something like a Kickstarter. And I really like to engage in a conversation like this because I think it allows people to really address both. Like you don't have to do anything with your art. This conversation isn't trying to tell anyone you have to do something, but if these are things you're thinking about, it's nice to be able to see, where we all start and our interests are, and then decide like, is this the kind of work or, does this sound like fun for me to kind of move forward with it?
I think it's probably a good decision to make early on, like whether or not you want to do something with it. I mean, it's never too late, obviously, but I definitely keep like the art for me separate from the business art, but it's also very useful to have the skills to be able to combine them, right? So to make it more legitimate. I mean, it's not that it's not legitimate, but like art as a practice, like I definitely have like the me side of art, more like my journaling and my sketchbook. And then there's the other side where it's like, okay, well, maybe I can share this and someone else can benefit from it. And maybe it can pay for itself. It's a bonus, but not always. It doesn't always happen that way.
Right. And I think you actually bring up something kind of accidentally using that word legitimate, because I think that is part of the battle we face as creatives, right? Which is why we naturally have that kind of conversation is like, when is it valuable or what do we have to do to make it worth our time or whatever? So I'm really glad you said that actually, because that's the goal here. Like that's part of why I'm so passionate about having these conversations is I want people to see that we're all doing this and we're all different and we're all finding our own way. So how did you come to the recent work that you're doing with the influence of an inspiration of space?
The space series has been really fun. So I kind of started with, I can backtrack a whole bunch, but I was working in animation for a while, and that was kind of like, I always wanted to do something like in any job that I would choose to do full time to support the family, I wanted it to be at least art related, right? So animation was fun for a while, but then after I decided to stop and just try painting full time, I really wanted to explore oil paints. And at first, I had never used oils before. I was all primarily acrylic and digital. And I found the paintings that I was drawn most to in other people's work were of clouds and skies. And I had never really painted clouds or skies before. And I said, okay, well, my goal is to just keep painting clouds until I get good at it. And because clouds are really hard to paint.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
And I kind of I started with like undersea stuff, and then it kind of evolved into exploring the textures and the backgrounds. And then a lot of people would say that my paintings of jellyfish and undersea stuff looked like space, or like it could be in space. And then I was also exploring the clouds at the same time. So I decided to kind of mix them, because I was also getting kind of sick of painting white clouds on blue skies, and I love color. So I went from white clouds on blue skies kind of to sunsets, and then I was like, it's still not enough color. So then that kind of went into me looking for references of like nebula and galaxies forming and that kind of thing, and those had elements that I was really drawn to. So the effects of light, or just color in different ways. And I tried to find references that really spoke to me. So like super colorful stuff, they had to have lots of color, lots of depth, and clouds or cloudy things. And then I would try to paint it as is. So I was using Hubble imagery, anything from NASA, because it's, open source stuff too. I started from that, and then I realized that painting it as is was a good challenge to see, to test my skills and technical abilities. And after a certain amount of time, I got really frustrated with trying to just reproduce an image. And I found I was enjoying myself the most when I started with a reference image and then let myself just wander, And often the pieces that were the most successful were the ones that had the strongest influence that was my own influence, So the space stuff was a really great way to play around and get the effects that I wanted, but not be limited by sticking to copying something, a reference, right? So it had a lot. I mean, the sky's the limit, right? So it could be as abstract or as, representational as I wanted it to be, as long as I could find something about, like, I would find a reference as a good starting point, and then do as much as I could based on that, and then let go, and then be able to put myself into it. So I think the freedom that it allowed me is what has kept me working on it for so long.
That sounds great. There's some really great takeaways in here for people too. Well, I really appreciate how you found that letting go of the reference image at certain points and trusting yourself to kind of finish it.
That was hard.
Yeah, sure.
Like I find my own tendencies when I let myself go is to work with pattern, and it tends to flatten things out sometimes. So I have to kind of limit how much I let go, because I tend to overwork things. I'm super detail oriented. So yeah, I see so many parallels in our work, actually. And especially coming from working with textiles, like I love knitting and crochet and cross stitch, and it's all of those, like, every pixel has to be something, and letting go of that has been finding the balance between the two. I find like my most successful pieces, at least in my opinion, are the ones where I follow it up to a certain point, I let myself go, but I still have to maintain a little bit of control. And by control, I mean the opposite, which is letting go.
Yeah, exactly. There's an awareness here too, though, that's, I think, helped your work succeed, in that you know this about yourself, right? Like, I think when we know about ourselves that we tend to overwork pieces, or, whatever it is, that then we can incorporate that into our process in terms of when we reflect or evaluate on a work, and when we decide to refine certain areas, or when we decide to let go and leave it.
Yeah. I think having a community has been so important with that, because sharing my work as I go, especially through Instagram or Facebook, sometimes I would post a piece and people said, "Oh, it's amazing, I want it." And then I'm like, but it's not done yet. But the feedback from other people and them saying, well, it looks done to me. And then I have to kind of step back and I'll leave it alone for a while, and I'll be like, you know what, it kind of is, it's done. And it's, the age old question of, is the painting finished yet?
Right.
When does it stop? Often is the hardest thing to do, but having the support of other people and really just saying, no, it looks fine as it is, don't overwork it. I'm like, okay.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, no, totally true. Totally true. So are you in your studio space right now? Can you share a little bit about it?
Sure. So this used to be a living room. I guess in most traditional suburban houses, like you walk in and then there's the fancy sitting room for whatever there is. And I tried to have my studio in there, but the lighting wasn't right. I've had a studio in almost every room in the house. Okay, so we've been in this house for like, it'll be 6 years in January. So I've had the front room, the light wasn't good. I had the side room, the light was okay, but it was too high traffic, his kids and stuff. And so this is what's supposed to be the living room. Behind me is the mantle, and that used to be a fireplace. And I've covered the fireplace with a pegboard and all my paints on it. Nice. The fireplace is useless anyway. The chimney's busted, and I'm not worried about that. For a while, this room was really, really busy. I had my desk at the back. It was like an L-shaped thing, and a big IKEA shelf. And then I had a mural commission, which kind of really helped shape my workflow, because I had to get rid of the desk, even just temporarily for the mural. And then I loved the space so much because the mural was the entire back wall. There were panels that were fixed to the wall. And it forced me to completely clear out the room and only focus on the mural. So at the time, only the things I was using for that project were in the room. And that's kind of been my rule now. Ever since I shipped out the mural, this room is just for art, you know? So I kind of had to like, I don't know, I got rid of a lot of clutter. So now the back wall just displays the works that are finished or ready to go to a show or in progress. The side wall over there is just blank, because I've also known that before I paint, I need to release a lot of energy, and I have my yoga stuff in here too. So that it also helps keep the floor clear, because if I know I'm going to be practicing, having my yoga practice, it means that I have to have at least, 6 to 8 feet around me. So that really helps keep the floor clear, because like in the past years, my art space turns into a complete disaster. Like I tend to hoard things, and especially because if you're teaching classes, I have like piles of canvases around, and then like, oh, I might need this later and I might need that. I also found that like forcing myself to choose a medium, which is really hard to do when you enjoy a lot of other things, has really helped. So I said, no, right now this is a painting and yoga studio. So I got rid of the textiles. I got rid of I still have my cello in here, but whatever, I barely ever play it now. But I got rid of like the printmaking, the ceramics, the drawing, everything else. So really clearing out the space and making it just about painting has really helped. And also the support from my family has been really handy, because this is no longer the living room. Now it's up front. They have a different room. So I'm really lucky to have the space.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I think at one point I could have easily started my own little art supply store, because it's so easy. Yeah.
When I need something,
things. I'm so excited, new things. But yeah, I've actually found too, if I can really just focus on whatever project's at hand and kind of hide away or get rid of those other supplies so they're not immediately accessible, even like that, it actually clears my mental space too. I totally relate to that.
Yeah,
Do you think that's part of your recent decision to kind of move forward in this like new direction with your work? Like I don't know how to describe it, because I mean, I know you a little bit, but I do feel like, you'd been thinking about shifting and you wanted to try to make your art practice a full-time job. And I don't know, in the past year, at least through social media that I've witnessed, I've really seen you step things up a notch. And so I'm curious, do you think, the space is part of that, and what was the impetus for making these decisions to kind of step up this presence, I guess you could say?
I think it probably, like, the catalyst was when I decided I wanted to go back to school, and I had to make a decision as to what do I really want to do, and why, and like what do I want to focus on. And a lot of it had to do with a family decision as to, okay, so I want to contribute, so I need to either get a job or go back to school to get another job, or take this seriously. It was kind of, it happened around when I was doing my first solo show. And it was kind of like, okay, this is for real now. I wanted to have that one solid solo show under my belt before I applied for my master's. And even just the application process was, I mean, I haven't been in school for like, I don't know, 15, 20 years. It's been a really long time. And it was one of those things where I had to really get back into that mindset. So that's when I started talking to other people about my work. And like, what do you think I'm doing? What does it look like I'm doing? And then writing a real artist statement and filling out applications and all that stuff and getting referrals and talking to teachers I haven't spoken to in a long time. And that whole process, I learned so much. I didn't get in. They only have 5 people that they select per year, and they had hundreds of applicants. So it was one of the University of Ottawa's art program is very intimate. And that's one of the reasons I applied, because it looked like such a cool kids club, right? And I really wanted to have a mentor, so to speak. So around the same time, I had also applied for the Ottawa Arts Network mentorship program. And I did get into that. And I think it was really a blessing, because not getting into the master's program with COVID, it would have been really difficult to go back to school, and at least with a more rigid academic schedule. But so it was really the Arts Network mentorship program that forced me to they said you have to make 3 goals. And the mentor I was working with, Tina Forney, she is an animator, but she's also a fine artist. But right now she teaches, or at least she did teach, animation in classroom settings. And I like her varied experience, because I also love teaching kids, and I do paint night style stuff for all ages. So we really resonated on that level too. So yeah, I think it was around February, March, I think. And that was when I really started to, well, first of all, part of the mentorship program was to actually outline what your goals were. And one of them was to make money off of my art, plain and simple. I wanted to monetize what I was doing, because actually painting is something I'm going to do either way. But having that residual income, not residual, is it residual? The background income from stuff like selling prints,
right?
Things where I'm not actively having to create an original every single time to produce a sale.
Right.
So it was the actual continuation of making work, and then that I could sell. Teaching workshops, which she has been helping me with, and teaching online. So those were 2 separate things at the time, but now they're kind of one thing because of COVID. But I think that really helped. It was definitely the mentorship program, and it kind of happened at the same time as that giant mural, which reset my space. Okay. So it was a lot of things at once. Yeah. And I think my mentor Tina, she has really helped with keeping me on track because my mind, my brain is just, always in a million directions at once. And she's really good at identifying, like, no, Kina, you should not start doing this project. You need to focus on the journals, or, so it's been really, I think the mentorship and the advice that I was seeking from the master's program ended up coming in a different form through the mentorship through Arts Network.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think having feedback from peers and mentors is so valuable. All the research that I've done in my education background suggests that feedback is an absolutely integral ingredient for us to up-level in our skill, and ultimately for anyone who we define as successful, that they've been really good and strategic about receiving feedback from people that can really help them move more quickly in the direction they want to go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also really appreciate you sharing about your master's, because I think as a culture, we can have a lot of shame or discomfort around saying when we've been rejected from something. I applied for a master's this year too, and also got rejected. So just, I think it's important that we all share that, because it's part of the journey. If we assume that a rejection means that our art isn't any good, then we're all going to quit. There's no moving forward, because I don't know an artist in history that hasn't faced some kind of rejection. And yet we celebrate people as if they're some kind of unicorn that's never had a mistake, or that's never faced some kind of struggle like that. And yet my experience has been in interviewing people and personally is that all of these so-called rejections are stepping stones to finding what we really want.
I think it really did help me define what I wanted, because I think as I am still watching all the artists on through the Ottawa University like for the fine arts program, and I love seeing their work and I love how passionate they are. And at the same time, it's like, you know what, I don't think I could just paint. And I think I'm really glad that I didn't end up getting accepted, because at the time that's what I thought I wanted, but it was probably a phase. It might have had something to do with seeing someone, you know, through social media and having you know, having a certain amount of success attributed to more academic achievement. But
Right.
I definitely had a realization that it's not just the painting. Like for me, I really enjoy print media, print design and graphic design
Right.
and all the stuff that goes along with like a small business. And I think I've
Yeah.
always had that kind of mentality. And I think if I would have pursued the master's, I would have been really missing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate writing papers.
Yeah, that's great. It's good to know yourself, you know? That's great. Okay, so can we dig into your Kickstarter story now?
Yeah,
So
totally.
I think I'd first really like to talk about your sourcing materials, because that immediately drew me to your project, even though I'm no longer in Ottawa and I bought your product, even though that kind of is counter to the whole local sourcing. But I love the whole idea, and so I really wanted to ask you questions about, you know, like, how did you start reaching out to people? How did you find things for your resources? How did that all kind of come together?
I think I had a lot of help from my mentor, Tina. And once I outlined to her, at first it was like, okay, I just want to make something that is easily accessible to people, that they can use. I'm very much like, I don't actually buy art myself, but I would love to buy something with someone else's art on it that I can use every day and see and kind of integrate to my life. I love, you know, clothing with artwork on it, or journals, you know, books and that kind of thing, because I see them and I use them all the time. So I wanted something like that for myself. And then at first, it was very much just finding, there are tons of places that do it. There are, like, you know, Vistaprint and Staples, and like there were places I was looking into overseas who do, they can, you know, have a journal or 500 of them, you know, like for 15 cents a pop, made in China and then shipped over. And like the amount of resources and possibilities was endless, you know. So it was just overwhelming. It was really too much. And I had suggestions coming in from, you know, if I ask, oh, who does this or who makes these, it was too much. And as soon as that kind of overwhelming feeling starts, I need to kind of go, you know, pedal back and try to define why it is that I'm making these, you know. So I ended up digging up all of my old journals, because I've been journaling and having a diary since I was my daughter's age, you know, like 10. So that was an experience in itself. And I realized, like, the pattern that I discovered through reading all of my old journals and looking at the old stuff is that I really just love the uniqueness of each journal. I would spend so much time, you know, trying to choose a journal, and that in itself, I wanted it to be meaningful. So, and then looking into my own values outside of art making and just looking at my everyday life, I'm super into recycling, and, you know, it was very much like a sustainability choice, you know. And even just looking back at my early influences, why I started journaling, it was mostly because of my mom. And she still journals, and she's also like the #1 reason that I am so, that recycling and sustainability and, you know, not wasting things. And it really was brought up, like I was brought up that way. So I wanted to join the two. And then I thought, okay, so if I'm gonna make the decision to be someone who makes a journal or an object of any art kind that is sustainable, first of all, there's the carbon footprint that kind of ruled out shipping from China. And nothing against China. I have tons of journals that might be from there and they're beautifully made. I don't want to, like, you know, bash it, especially if, you know, if you don't have a choice, you know, if you're making something like that. But I wanted to see if I did have a choice. So I started looking into different printing companies in Ottawa to start. And I found one, the Printing House. They're a Canadian company, and they work both in Ottawa, Toronto, and different locations. And they were really helpful at first. And they had some beautiful samples on their website, and I started a dialogue with, which in itself was really challenging. I don't like using the phone, as a lot of us are.
Oh, I
Or
totally
going in
understand
person.
that.
And with the added stress of COVID, I couldn't speak to anyone in person. So that was challenging, but at least they were local and I could pick up samples at their door and stuff. So that created like a comfort with me just approaching a not small, but small-ish business. And the reason I came up with, I just looked up printers in Ottawa, really. It wasn't like, I had used them before on other projects, so I knew that they produced good work.
Okay.
I kind of already have like an arsenal of different print houses that I know of. These guys are good at this, these guys are good at that.
Okay.
So that in itself I already had that. So then it became an issue of looking for someone who does bookbinding. And so TPH does do binding to a certain extent, but after a certain amount of time, I realized that actually I have the prototype here. I use it now. This is the back, there's the front cover, there's a sticker on it, but they were wonderful with printing, but the binding itself, so the spine is not super, like, because of the amount of pages that I needed, it doesn't lay flat. And that was a huge obstacle because when you're journaling, you want it to be open, like a sketchbook, and people do use watercolors and stuff in their journal, and the last thing you want is for it to snap shut. So I had to expand outside of Ottawa, because Ottawa is not really a book manufacturing city. We have a lot of them in Toronto and a lot in Montreal. So I ended up going with the print shop in Montreal, and we're still working back and forth with the prototype. And that's just with the journal itself, but I also wanted to have, there are a few reasons why, but I wanted to have some extras as far as the bags that I'm having made and the pencil cases. And for that, I've seen, again, it was the same thing where I've seen stuff on Society6 or Vistaprint or some beautiful options to do tote bags and stuff. And I said, what if I can get my own artwork on the bag, but not, like, I just want a few of them. And I think people would support it if they knew it was handmade, and it would be really special, like just having something where you make it yourself and you know who made it, so that didn't make sense. Anyway, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I approached two friends because I can sew, but not quickly, and I didn't want to get distracted. So like when I told Tina, it's like, well, I want to have bags to go with them, and I want matching pencil cases, and like she said, okay, well, if the sky's the limit, what would you make? And that's what I came up with. I want a whole line of stuff that I wanted to all have my art on it, and I want it to match, and I want it to be fun. And she goes, well, do it, but don't do it yourself. I get people to help, So I hired two different friends, and one of them is doing the tote bags, and one of them is doing the pencil cases. And I had the artwork printed on the fabric, and so I chose a couple pieces to have printed. That was tricky. I ended up having to use, there's one printer in Mississauga, and the other one is actually in the UK. So that is like the only part where I really did try to have fabric printed more locally, but again, it's an industry problem. Like Ottawa just doesn't really do much of that. So starting close and then expanding as I needed to make sure that I got the quality that I needed. So at least it's like, they're made by hand. The fabric's from over the pond, but not that far.
No, I think that's great. And I mean, that just shows how you have a goal in mind, and you become flexible as you need to, as you're striving to, finish the larger goal or picture, which are these products, which I am so excited. I'm now getting a pencil case. I had upgraded my pledge as soon as I saw someone hadn't. I was like, yay, you can finally get the pencil case, because I really
I'm so excited about them. Yeah, they're going to be a lot of fun. I got the fabric. I was super impressed with the quality, and the girl I'm asking I follow her fashion Instagram. She makes her own clothing, and I can really tell that mattered a lot. Like I wanted them to enjoy doing it. Like I didn't want something where it was mass produced, because I wanted someone else who really, I want to pay them for their work, and I want to make it worth their while, but I also would like to know that they're having fun with it too. So it's been a really fun experience. It's definitely more about making something special than like making, a ton of money off of a large amount of objects, because I want it to mean something.
Yeah. And speaking of funding, your Kickstarter was funded like zillion times over. So that's great. Congratulations on that. What do you
Thank you
think
so much.
helped? What do you think helped you surpass your fundraising goals?
Well, one of the things was that I knew I have a quote, like I had a quote from the print shop as to how much it would cost to make,
Right.
I think I'm getting 200, at first it was for 200 journals. Because it's such a low number, the cost per unit skyrockets, right? Because they, it's just the law of printing. So at first I got that quote and it was terrifying. It was over $8,000. And I'm just like, okay, well, so I had to change a few things. I had to lower a few expectations, and because at first I had wanted like a little paper pouch at the back and like a bunch of different bookmarks and which, like I said, like you shoot for the moon and then you get. So for the Kickstarter, once I was researching different ways to, because I also thought of doing pre-sales through my website, but that I felt wouldn't really show people that I needed their help. And having that countdown and having a goal in mind really helped. And even though, like the actual quote was still well over 1,000, but I figured I didn't even know, like I have maybe 1,000 people that I know on social media, and that's like the big picture, right? So it's like, well, I can't put the whole quote amount on there. I'm going to save up and then I'll have Kickstarter. So a big part of it was setting the goal a bit lower on Kickstarter, because if you don't meet that low goal, you don't get any of it. Right. And that was kind of like a point, I wasn't really sure how that would end up, because even 1,000 at the time was just like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to raise $1,000. Like that's nuts, let alone like 5,000 or whatever. So I set the bar kind of low, so that, not that it's cheating.
It's not cheating. No, I think it's strategic.
Yeah, like, because I knew that if you don't make it, like by 50 days, if you don't make that goal, then you don't get any of it. And then I would have to restart the whole plan where doing pre-sales and finding a different way to get people to be able to reserve their copy. So I set the bar kind of low. I mean, it still felt high to me, because like I'm like, 50 days to raise $1,000. That's like, so I also started adding different, and that was around the time where I decided to add something more than the journal. So I've been designing the stickers, and that's when I introduced the bags, because I wanted to add certain things to make it, to give people options. And also if you make more options that are, well, more money, so you can have fewer people who buy it for a little more, and then, they can choose their level of engagement and how much they want to actually commit. So yeah, but the thing is, like, I posted it on Facebook, and the amount of time that I spent prepping the Kickstarter, I really put everything into it. I made a video, and like I wrote a really long story, and I followed all the things that they had suggested in the, they give a really good, like, for anyone wanting to do a Kickstarter, they have an amazing step-by-step, like these are the statistics of successful campaigns and what they did, and these are the things they had in common. So I followed that to the letter, and I really tried my best to make it look at least professional, as professional as I could. So when I posted it, I think just all the work that I put into it, and like the branding, I made a little logo for it, really helped it stand out, and it got funded within an hour. So I was blown away. It was one of those things where I asked Kickstarter, I'm like, can I increase the limit? They're like, no, you can't, but you can sell more than, I didn't know. So I'm just like, well, what if I only sell 10 of these packages, and then it's like I have 300 journals sitting in my basement. Right. Anyway, but it ended up at 5,700. So great. I'm so grateful and so happy.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's so great. I think that's really good advice too for people to hear thinking about doing a fundraiser, because I think sometimes we think go big or go home. Again, kind of this cultural drive for achievement and what it all should look like, right? Rather than being practical and asking, well, I really need this funding to realize this. What's realistic for myself? What makes me feel comfortable? And as you found out, people can keep supporting it well past the goal that you set. So that's great. We need to start wrapping up in a minute, but I've got a couple more questions for you. And then there is a question in the chat that we'll get to as well. I'm going to save it for the end though. So just in general, what advice do you have for people who might be thinking they have similar goals that you've been talking about? What do you wish you knew, or what would you encourage people to be thinking about?
Well, there are a few things, really. I think the big one that was a takeaway from my mentorship program, which I would totally, first of all, I would recommend you look to people who are not super far ahead of you, but I think it's important for me to identify people who are on a similar path as myself, but not crazy far, maybe 10 steps ahead, not 100, because their advice, and it doesn't matter if they're not in the same practice
genre or whatever.
The same genre, exactly. Experience is experience, and whether it be life experience or career related, any of it is valuable. And I really value that. And I've been listening to a lot of different business podcasts, and even if they haven't anything to do with art, it's all really valuable information. So starting by educating yourself as to what other people are doing and seeing what people ahead of you, what their life looks like and what their practice looks like. And another thing for a project like this, I think it was important for me to make sure it was still in line with what I pictured myself doing in, say, 5 or 10 years from now, So it's easy to have said, okay, my goal is to make a line of clothing and sell that. But like, are you a fashion designer? Are you actually going to be passionate about making clothes? What if this really takes off and you're stuck doing this? I mean, It's not a worst case scenario, obviously.
No,
but,
yeah.
Making sure that the project that's related, like if it is some kind of project that involves your art, make sure that it's going to complement your art and go in the same direction. Because if I had decided to make a line of, like, I don't know, pot holders, it's like, well, I don't really like cooking that much, Try to find something that complements your practice and completes it in a way that, like, if this ends up defining you, are you okay with that? So if you don't want to be typecast into making, like, I don't know, like pencil, I don't mind. I love pencil cases. I love to be typecast as someone who designs journals because it's part of who I am, and journaling and documenting, it's something I have been doing all the time anyway, and having sketchbooks and that kind of thing. So choosing something that matches what you're already doing and what you're passionate about helps, because later on when things start, like if you hit a snag or a bump and then it's like, well, I don't really like XYZ anymore, but I have to finish this project, then it can be really difficult. So finding something that you actually believe in, and like sustainability is something that I live by anyway. So all of the elements of this project had to resonate each in their own way to me. So
they were aligned.
Yeah, exactly. Alignment. That's a good word.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's a great takeaway for people here having this conversation, watching, enjoying this chat with us is, are the choices, are you getting excited about the next new random art supply because you're just excited, and exploration is valuable and important. But if you are thinking about goals where you're talking about monetizing and earning a living from it, then is it really in alignment with your larger picture of your art life? That's a great question to be asking. Before I get to the last question, I am going to jump in. So this is a little bit of shifting gears, but there was a question in the chat about your studio space, and they wanted to know what you use for supplemental lighting, or is it all natural?
Oh, goodness. That's a really good question. This is my back door. So most of the light during the day it's natural light from my backyard, and it is a big reason why I chose the back room of the house, because I get a lot of light during the day. Something else which I can totally show you is a construction. I don't know if you can still hear me. Can you see this?
A little bit. We're a little blurry. But
It's okay. It's a floodlight. It's a large professional. It's my husband's because he works on cars. So basically it's really, really bright. Okay, so you turn it on, it's like sunshine in your room. It's a construction tool. It's normally used by people doing work at night in a garage setting. I happened to have it for the mural project because I needed to be able to work on the mural at night, and that back corner of my room gets pretty dark very quickly after the sun goes away. So it's not an art supply. It takes up a ton of room, but it's really, really handy. So any hardware store will have them for sure.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So I just want to, before we ask that last question, Kina, I just want to thank you for spending this time here with us and sharing your personal experience, because it's wisdom that other people don't have yet. And now people get to learn from this conversation and reflect on their own artist practice and see how it all fits together for them. So thank you for this time and for sharing and just being so open about your journey.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Absolutely. So I always like to end with a question about defining artist. What does that mean? And so what does it mean to you to be an artist?
I had fun with this one when you gave it to me. I thought about it for a long time, because how often do we ask ourselves that, you know? And it's one of those things where it's like, I've been making art for so long, and sometimes you forget to put a definition or a reason on it. And I think what I ended up coming up with is that, at least for me, I have to make sure, not that it's a conscious decision, but putting my practice first all the time. And it doesn't mean like ignoring my kids or not doing chores and stuff, but it's more about making my life part of my art and not making art part of my life, if that makes sense. So it's like having, putting myself in my everyday life, making that part of my practice, instead of saying this is my life and then cramming art in a corner somewhere, you know? So letting every aspect of your life, whether it be motherhood or, you know, like the journaling has meant a lot to me, and that's part of my life, and how it integrates into myself. So taking all the things that I am and putting that into my practice, that for me, and not the other way around, if that makes sense. So it's not like I have my life and then I'm going to sit down and be an artist now. No, there are no borders. There's no separation for me. So it's just part of who I am. And it informs how I look at things, and it staying curious, you know, and going for it. Like, even if I'm on a walk with a friend, and if I, for example, yesterday, I was walking with my husband and I saw a really cool poster for a slushie. Okay. I really loved the color. It was a lot like the colors of that painting there. It was like purple and bright blue, and like it was just that. And I'm like, without saying anything, I just go this other direction. I take a picture and then continue. And like, he's totally used to that, right? But it's that kind of thing where it's like, I'm always thinking about it. It's always on my brain, and just part of life. So living it, really, that's what it means for me.
Well said. Thank you all so much for watching our conversation. If you are watching this live, thanks for being here with us. And if you are watching this as a replay, you can, you know, please continue this conversation. If there's a big aha moment you've had, a big lesson for yourself, post it in the comments below, and we'll keep the conversation going. So thank you everyone for being here, and thanks again to Kina, and we'll see you again sometime soon, guys. Have a great day.
Bye.